I've always been drawn to the wilderness. There's a primal beauty to it, a sense of raw power that can't be replicated in the confines of civilization. So when my high school friends suggested a camping trip to Devil's Peak, I jumped at the chance. It was me, Alex, Sarah, and Matt. We'd been friends since childhood, inseparable through thick and thin. But little did we know our bond would be tested in ways we never could have imagined on that fateful trip to Devil's Peak. The journey started out like any other camping trip. We loaded up our gear, piled into Alex's beat-up old SUV, and hit the road, eager for adventure. The sun was setting by the time we arrived at the base of Devil's Peak, its rugged silhouette looming ominously against the twilight sky. Undeterred by the gathering darkness, we shouldered our packs and began to hike up the winding trail that led to the summit. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and the only sound was the crunch of our footsteps on the rocky path. As we climbed higher, the forest grew denser, the trees closing in around us like silent sentinels. But we pressed on, fueled by the promise of breathtaking views and the camaraderie of friendship. It wasn't long before night fell, blanketing the forest in darkness. We set up camp in a small clearing near the peak, the glow of our campfire casting eerie shadows on the surrounding trees. We roasted hot dogs, swapped ghost stories, and laughed until our sides hurt, the warmth of friendship warding off the chill of the night. But as the fire burned low and the forest grew quiet, a sense of unease settled over us like a shroud. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that unseen eyes followed our every move from the darkness beyond the firelight. Sarah was the first to notice it, a strange guttural chanting that seemed to emanate from the depths of the forest. At first, we dismissed it as the wind playing tricks on our ears, but as the chanting grew louder and more insistent, we knew we couldn't ignore it any longer. Fear clutched at my heart as we huddled together, listening to the haunting melody that echoed through the trees. Alex suggested we pack up and leave, but something held us in place, a primal curiosity that demanded we uncover the source of the chanting. With trembling hands, we extinguished the fire and ventured into the darkness, our flashlights cutting through the inky blackness like beams of hope in a sea of despair. The chanting grew louder with each step, guiding us deeper into the heart of the forest until we reached a clearing bathed in moonlight. And there, in the center of the clearing, we saw it, a circle of standing stones, their weathered surfaces etched with strange symbols and runes. At the center of the circle stood a figure cloaked in shadow, its voice rising in a crescendo of madness as it chanted in a language long forgotten by mortal tongues. Terror gripped us as we watched, rooted to the spot by a fear beyond comprehension. We knew then that we had stumbled upon something ancient and malevolent, something that should never have been disturbed. But before we could flee, the figure turned its gaze upon us, its eyes burning with a hatred as old as time itself. With a blood-curdling scream, it lunged forward, its twisted form contorting in ways that defied logic and reason. We ran, our screams echoing through the night as we fled for our lives. Branches tore at our clothes, roots snaked out from the earth to trip us, and all the while, the chanting pursued us like a relentless shadow. I don't know how we made it back to the safety of civilization, or what became of the figure in the clearing. But one thing is certain, Devil's Peak holds secrets far darker than any of us could have imagined, and those who dare to seek them out do so at their own peril. It was supposed to be a fun family camping trip, a chance for us to escape the hustle and bustle of city life and reconnect with nature. My name is Alex, and I was looking forward to spending quality time with my wife, Sarah, and our two children, Emily and Tyler. Little did we know that our peaceful retreat would turn into a nightmare we would never forget. We arrived at Whispering Pines Campground late in the afternoon, greeted by the soft rustle of leaves and the sweet scent of pine. The campground was nestled deep within a dense forest, with towering trees casting long shadows over the narrow dirt paths. As we set up our tent, kids chased each other around the clearing, their laughter echoing through the woods. Night fell quickly, and we gathered around the crackling campfire, roasting marshmallows and sharing ghost stories. Sarah was always the skeptic, dismissing tales of haunted woods as mere superstition. But as the night grew darker and the fire burned low, even she couldn't deny the eerie atmosphere surrounding us. That's when we first heard it, a faint whispering coming from the depths of the forest. At first, I brushed it off as the wind playing tricks on us, but the whispers grew louder, more insistent, as if beckoning us into the darkness. Unease settled over our little campsite like a thick fog, and Sarah suggested we turn in for the night. We retreated to our tent, tucking the kids into their sleeping bags and zipping up the flaps tightly. But sleep eluded me as the whispers continued to haunt my thoughts, weaving through my dreams like a sinister melody. Sometime past midnight, I woke to the sound of footsteps outside our tent. At first, I thought it was just my imagination, but then I heard Sarah's sharp intake of breath beside me. I reached for the flashlight, my heart pounding in my chest, and zipped the tent flap slowly, peering into the darkness beyond. There, standing at the edge of the clearing, was a figure cloaked in shadow, a tall, slender silhouette that seemed to sway in the breeze like a wisp of smoke. I called out, but the figure remained silent, watching us with empty, soulless eyes. Fear gripped me like a vice as I fumbled for the lantern, casting its feeble light across the clearing. But when I turned back to the spot where the figure had stood, it was gone, leaving behind only the echo of its chilling presence. We spent the rest of the night huddled together, listening to the whispers that seemed to seep through the varied fabric of our tent. Dawn couldn't come soon enough, and as the first light of morning filtered through the trees, we wasted no time packing up our belongings and fleeing the campground. But the horror didn't end there. For weeks after our camping trip, we were plagued by nightmares, visions of shadowy figures lurking in the darkness, their whispers echoing in our ears like a sinister refrain. Sarah became withdrawn, haunted by the memory of that fateful night, while Emily and Tyler refused to set foot outside after dark, their once carefree laughter silenced by fear. We tried to convince ourselves that it was just our imaginations running wild, that there was a logical explanation for the strange occurrences that Whispering Pines. But deep down, we knew the truth. There are forces in this world that defy rational explanation. Ancient spirits that linger in the shadows, waiting to ensnare unsuspecting souls in their web of darkness. And though we may try to forget, the whispers of Whispering Pines will haunt us forever, a chilling reminder of the horrors that lurk just beyond the edge of our reality. My boots crunched on the frosty pine needles, the pre-dawn air staining my lungs. A rookie mistake, I realized, forgetting just how high in the Rockies we were. My friend, Alex, whistled a jaunty tune ahead, completely oblivious to the biting chill. We were on a week-long backpacking trip and rarely touched grizzlies, a remote section of the national park known for its rugged beauty, and, as the ranger hesitantly mentioned, occasional lack of cellular service. After 5 hours, the trail narrowed, choked by thick pines. Sunlight struggled to penetrate the dense canopy, casting long, unnerving shadows. A strange unease settled over me. We hadn't seen another soul for hours, and the silence was broken only by the snap of twigs underfoot and the occasional cry of a distant bird. "I think we're lost," Alex asked, his voice losing its earlier chippiness. "Nah," I lied, though a flicker of worry sparked in my stomach. There's got to be a bend in the trail soon. But the trail just kept going, a seemingly endless tunnel of emerald shadows. Around noon, the temperature dropped further. We huddled in a clearing, shivering, trying to build a fire with damp wood. Smoke stung our eyes, but it offered scant warmth. Hunger gnawed at our bellies. We only had one granola bar left, a meager offering for 2 growing men. "Maybe we should turn back," Alex suggested, his voice tight. I hesitated. The thought of retracing our steps through that endless tunnel of trees was no more appealing. Plus, the ranger had warned against venturing back in the dark. Let's just push on for another hour, I said, more for my own reassurance than his. We trudged on, fatigue clinging to us like a second skin. Just as despair threatened to consume me, I saw it, a faint light flickering ahead. Hope surged through me like a jolt. We stumbled towards it, hearts pounding. As we got closer, the light resolved into a single flickering lantern, casting an orange glow on a ramshackle cabin nestled amongst the trees. Smoke curled from its chimney, promising warmth and, more importantly, food. Relief washed over me, so intense it almost masked the unsettling silence surrounding the cabin. A wizened old man with a shock of white hair answered our knock. He eyed us with suspicion, his dark eyes glinting from beneath bushy brows. Despite the initial coldness, he eventually relented, grudgingly offering us shelter and a meager meal of stew. We devoured it ravenously, grateful for the simple act of human kindness. As the fire crackled in the hearth, the old man, who introduced himself as Jebediah, explained he was a hermit, a recluse who'd chosen the solitude of the mountains decades ago. He spoke with the harsh beauty of the grizzlies, his voice a low rumble. Then, his eyes narrowed. "You shouldn't be here so late," he said, his voice dropping a notch. "The shadows lengthen in the mountains at dusk, and things stirred that shouldn't be disturbed." A shiver ran down my spine. Jebediah's words stirred a primal fear within me, but exhaustion won. We crashed on the floor beside the warm hearth, sleep claiming us instantly. I awoke with a start, a cold sweat clinging to my skin. A blood-curdling shriek tore through the night, raw and primal. It sounded close, far too close. Alex was up too, fear etched on his face. We exchanged a silent glance, the scream echoing in the silence of the cabin. Jebediah was gone. The fire had dwindled to embers, casting flickering shadows that danced menacingly on the walls. Another shriek pierced the night, closer this time, followed by a low guttural growl that sent shivers down my spine. Panic clawed at me. Grabbing our backpacks, we rushed to the door, but it wouldn't budge. It was bolted shut from the outside. Trapped. The growls grew louder, closer. We huddled together in the center of the room, hearts pounding a frantic rhythm against our ribs. Suddenly, a sickening thud hit the roof. The cabin groaned under the weight. Another thud, closer this time. We huddled closer, fear choking the air around us. Then silence, a tense, pregnant kind of silence that seemed to amplify the pounding of our hearts. We stayed like that, huddled and frozen, until the first rays of dawn peeked through the cracks in the cabin walls. Relief washed over me, weak and fleeting. We were alive for now. With trembling hands, I managed to pry loose a loose floorboard. We squeezed through the opening, finding ourselves in a dark crawl space. We crawled blindly, the damp earth sucking at our clothes, until we emerged under the floor of the cabin. I've always been drawn to the wilderness, to the rugged beauty of untouched landscapes, and the thrill of exploring uncharted territory. So when my friends suggested a camping trip deep in the heart of the Cascade Mountains, I jumped at the chance. We planned for weeks, meticulously packing our gear and mapping out our route through the dense forests and rocky terrain. As we set out on the trail, excitement coursed through my veins, mingled with a healthy dose of apprehension at the unknown adventures that lay ahead. The first day passed without incident, the sun warm on our faces as we hiked through the towering trees, the sound of birdsong filling the air. But as night fell and we made camp in a secluded clearing, a sense of unease settled over me like a heavy blanket. I brushed off my nerves as nothing more than jitters from being in unfamiliar territory. But as darkness descended and the forest grew silent, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. That night, as I lay in my tent, the hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a chill ran down my spine. It felt as if someone or something was lurking just beyond the edge of our campsite, hidden in the shadows. I tried to push the thought from my mind and drift off to sleep, but sleep eluded me. I tossed and turned in my sleeping bag, my senses on high alert. And then, just as I was on the brink of drifting into unconsciousness, I heard the unmistakable sound of whispers drifting through the trees. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to listen, the voices growing louder and more insistent with each passing moment. I wanted to wake my friends, tell them I was hearing, but fear held me in its icy grip, rendering me powerless to move or speak. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the whispers ceased, leaving behind an eerie silence that was almost worse than the sound itself. I lay awake for the rest of the night, my mind racing with thoughts of what could be lurking in the darkness just beyond our campsite. The next morning, I was relieved to find that my friends had also heard the strange whispers during the night, confirming that I wasn't just imagining things. We packed up our campsite in record time, eager to put as much distance between ourselves and whatever had been haunting us in the night. But as we continued along the trail, the feeling of being watched never quite left me, a shadowy presence lingering just out of sight. I tried to shake off my unease, telling myself that it was just my imagination running wild. But deep down, I knew that something was terribly wrong. As we made camp that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, the sense of unease growing stronger with each passing moment. And then, as darkness fell, and we settled in for the night, I heard it again, the unmistakable sound of whispers drifting through the trees. This time, I refused to let fear paralyze me, and I woke my friends, urging them to listen. Together, we strained to hear the sound, our hearts pounding in our chests as it grew louder and more frantic. And then, just as suddenly as before, the whispers ceased, leaving us in a state of terrified anticipation. We huddled together in our tents, the darkness pressing in around us, praying for the first light of dawn to chase away the shadows. When morning finally came, we wasted no time in breaking camp and fleeing back down the trail. The memory of those haunting whispers burned into our minds. We never did find out what or who had been stalking us in the night, and to this day, the memory of that camping trip still sends shivers down my spine. But one thing's for certain, I'll never forget the feeling of being watched. The sense of unseen eyes following our every move as we stumbled through the darkness of the Cascade Wilderness. And though I've been camping many times since then, I'll always be haunted by the memory of the Whispering Woods.